The Economist.
Hello and welcome to The Intelligence from The Economist. I'm your host, Rosie Blore. Every weekday, we provide a fresh perspective on the events shaping your world. A century ago, nearly 3/4 of children in North America suffered from iodine deficiency. The fix was simple and worked. But now, so-called wellness foods may be helping to reverse that trend. And you know that awful moment when you realise you're in a lift with your boss and you have absolutely nothing impressive to say? Our management correspondent explains the secrets of elevator etiquette. But first, after leaving office in January 2021, Donald Trump went on to make history as the first former president to face criminal trials and later convictions.
The verdict is in. Former President Donald Trump is found guilty on all 34 criminal charges against him in a New York courtroom.
Among those were 34 felony counts relating to hush money paid to an adult film star, Stormy Daniels.
When they say falsifying business, that's a bad thing for me. I've never had that before. I'm falsifying.
Since being re-elected, the legal cloud over Trump appears to be clearing. Yesterday, Special Counsel Jack Smith, the prosecutor bringing two separate cases against Trump, asked for them to be dismissed.
On election night, we knew that Donald Trump's myriad complex legal problems essentially would be going away, and 3 weeks later, we now know what's going to happen to the federal cases.
Adam O'Neill is our Washington correspondent.
There's some ambiguity ahead of time, but now we'll have a better sense of what's happening in Donald Trump's legal problems.
And essentially, his legal problems have gone away, right? The prosecutor asked to have those charges dropped.
Correct. So the two state cases, and that's a whole other bag of worms, but these are the two federal cases. One for mishandling classified documents and crimes related to that, and another one for attempting to overturn the 2020 election and various crimes related to that. And essentially, the federal prosecutor, Jack Smith, the special counsel, said that he wasn't commenting on the merits of the case, but simply acknowledging the reality that it's been a long-standing policy that presidents can't be convicted of crimes while they're in office, and that the case was now being dismissed, importantly, without prejudice.
So are these cases dead now, or may they one day resurface?
The without prejudice line, now I'm not a lawyer, but when you talk to people who went to school longer than I did, what they'll tell you is that that opens the door to bringing the cases back. There's a separate question about whether it's politically wise, say if the Democrats win in 2028, 4 years from now, to bring back these years-old cases that American voters knew about and still delivered Donald Trump to the White House. And certainly if a Republican wins, there's virtually no chance of them bringing them back. I'd say that most people are fairly confident that although the door is being left open and Jack Smith certainly doesn't want to give up the merits of the cases, it seems highly unlikely that a Donald Trump departing from the White House would suddenly face these legal issues again.
And as you mentioned, it's the federal cases that have just been dropped. And there were obviously other legal troubles facing Trump this year. Has everything else fallen away?
Separate from the federal cases, you have two state cases, one in New York and one in Georgia. In New York, Donald Trump is facing charges over hush money payments to a porn star and that he falsified business documents related to this. Now, that case, he's already been convicted on all 34 counts. The question is, when will his sentencing take place? And it's essentially been extended indefinitely. The Manhattan District Attorney has not dropped the charges, but just said that we understand that we can't sentence a sitting president, so we're going to wait to bring down those charges. In Georgia, you have a racketeering case involving Donald Trump and other associates allegedly involved in a conspiracy to overturn the result in the presidential election in Georgia. Now, in that case, you have questions of misconduct involving the prosecutor, and that's currently being resolved. And either she can be removed from the case and perhaps a new prosecutor will be assigned who drops the charges, but at the very least, it's going to be delayed for a long time. Whatever happens, all of them are going away, at least until Donald Trump is done being president, if they ever come back at all.
And presumably Trump's delighted about this.
Yeah, Donald Trump took, I think, what could be best described as a victory lap. He had his spokesman come out and say that these were politically motivated prosecutions against him. They never should have been brought. This is a triumph for the rule of law. J.D. Vance, his vice president, agreed with him. And I suspect that Donald Trump, as he is wont to do, will bring these up from time to time. And the question really is, what kind of action does he take? Will he try to investigate the investigators, so to speak? And there are real debates about that within conservative circles and people connected to Trump about whether he wants to or not. And that I think is the bigger question than what happens to Donald Trump's cases is what happens to the people who were involved in attempting to prosecute him.
Over the summer, as we discussed on the show, the Supreme Court issued a decision that presidents were excluded from prosecution in some cases. Was that at play here?
A Supreme Court majority ruled that presidents are immune from what they called official acts. After that happened, theoretically, Donald Trump's case would have been thrown out. But the prosecutors here, they refiled the charges and said that his attempt to overthrow the election was connected to his election campaign, not to his duties as president. And so one thing that Jack Smith was careful to do when dropping it was also saying that we're not ceding so much ground that everything he possibly does while president is an official act, because he didn't want to set that precedent for future cases. But that remains to be resolved.
And Adam, we're in a busy news season for the president-elect even before he actually becomes president, as well as this legal situation. Overnight, he's just put a figure on his pledge to slap tariffs on imports. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Right. He's announced 25% tariffs on all imports from Canada and Mexico, two very large trading partners for the United States. In addition to that, he's also threatened 10% tariffs on imports from China. Now the debate in Washington and people who watch trade and in conservative circles is Donald Trump really serious about imposing these tariffs? He's just won a mandate essentially to stop illegal immigration and lower prices. And this is a formula, especially with these three trading partners in particular, to raise prices. What a lot of Trump's defenders say is, no, the man is a negotiator, and this is his opening bid, and this is to show the Mexicans, the Canadians, and the Chinese that he's serious, and he wants them to resolve these issues that he laid out and complained about when announcing this. Whether or not they call his bluff or he sees some movement upon taking office, that's what remains to be seen. But this in of itself was not a huge surprise.
Adam, great to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
You can see people with goiters in Pre-Raphaelite paintings. It's a swelling in the neck that used to be so common it was seen as normal. But that bulge isn't a good thing. It's a sign that the thyroid gland is enlarged, and it's caused by a deficiency of iodine, which can lead to a whole host of health problems. You don't see those swellings anymore because a fix was found. Mix iodine into table salt. It's simple. So why then is iodine deficiency on the rise again?
One major reason iodine deficiency is returning is because iodine supplementation in salt was never required, only recommended.
Dina Musa writes about health.
A lot of the salts that we eat, for example, in processed foods or through specialty salts like sea salt or Himalayan, aren't iodized. Even among table salt, only about half in the US contains iodine.
How serious a problem is this?
In the 1920s in the United States, large swaths of the country, including the Appalachians, were known as the goiter belt, after the enlarged thyroids that were indicative of iodine deficiency in the area. Anywhere between 26 and 70% of children in the area had visibly enlarged thyroids and were impacted by iodine deficiency.
And what effect does that have? What does the body actually do with iodine?
Iodine is a mineral used by your thyroid to produce certain hormones, and those hormones are crucial in regulating many of your bodily functions, including your heart rate, your body temperature, bone and brain development, digestion, and a lot of other important things. Because of this, people who are iodine deficient face a lot of potential health risks, including heart problems or cognitive deficiencies. In the US, iodine levels have fallen by more than half between the 70s and the 90s. Right now, they're just shy of insufficiency. And if the median is that close to the danger zone, that means there are a lot of people, far too many, who are not getting enough iodine. Women are especially at risk. Pregnant women need 1.5 times as much iodine as when they're not pregnant. And pregnancy and early childhood is an especially critical window for iodine intake. If you don't get enough iodine during pregnancy, it can result in miscarriage, stillbirth, and stunted cognitive and physical development for the baby. Studies show that about half of women in the US of reproductive age have inadequate iodine levels.
I do remember, actually, when I was wanting to get pregnant, that was like the one moment in my life when people did talk about iodine and everyone encourages you to take iodine tablets. Is this a problem outside the US?
Absolutely, yeah. Iodine is a global problem. The WHO estimates that about 2 billion people worldwide are iodine deficient. And in many countries in Europe, the average iodine levels are actually below sufficiency. So it's potentially an even bigger problem in Europe.
So we know we can iodize table salt, and of course you can take supplements, but how else can people increase their intake of iodine?
Another really important source of iodine is cow milk or dairy. But increasingly, people are shifting toward dairy alternatives like oat milk or soy milk, which typically aren't iodized. And even organic milk is likely to contain significantly less iodine than normal cow's milk. That might be a really good thing for animal welfare, for climate change, or even for other human health considerations. But it means that people are getting less iodine than they used to, and they need to seek it out in other ways.
So what you're saying is that things that we think of as healthy, like specialty salts or oat milk and soy milk, may actually cause other health problems.
Absolutely. And that doesn't mean to drop your soy milk or oat milk necessarily, but it does mean that we need to shift policy in order to accommodate for those changes.
In the past, we solved this problem, right? In the 1920s, iodine deficiency basically disappeared. So surely we can fix it pretty quickly now.
Yeah. So, historical efforts to iodize salt in the US successfully eliminated the goiter belt, which shows that policy interventions can work. We can identify the foods that are most commonly consumed by deficient populations and that act as a substitute for foods with a lot of iodine. Dairy alternatives and salt use in processed foods are at the top of that list, but iodine can also be added to bread, like in Australia or Denmark, or prenatal vitamins for a really targeted approach. These are really simple and cost-effective interventions. It only costs about 10 cents per person per year to iodize salt, for example.
How much appetite do you think governments have for actually dealing with this?
Well, I think we've seen before the massive impact that iodine deficiency can have on a population's health and well-being. So, for example, after the goiter belt was eliminated, some studies estimate that there was a 15-point IQ increase in the regions with the biggest iodine deficiency. That was reflected in massive increases in test scores for those entering the military. So there's very clearly a public health benefit and an economic and a productivity benefit even toward increasing iodine intake. We've solved this problem before in the US, and there are simple and cost-effective solutions available to us. We just need to take advantage of them before iodine average levels dip below sufficiency.
Dina, thank you so much for talking to me. Really interesting.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You may have heard of the elevator pitch.
Andrew Palmer presents our Boss Class podcast, and today he'll be advising us on office lift etiquette.
In the 90 seconds it takes to travel from the lobby to the office, an upstart recent graduate proposes an idea to a CEO that changes the world. But, upstart recent graduates, I'm here to disappoint you. The lift ride at the office is not where careers ignite. It is where you experience incompetence and awkwardness as you gradually make your way to your destination. As a way of understanding what it's like to be at work, in other words, it's an ideal place to start. So here are a few basic tips to survive the lift. When people are waiting for a lift, someone will stand right in front of the doors. They will be so close their breath mists the metal. In the lift that is descending towards them, someone else will be standing as close as possible to their set of doors. When the doors open, these two individuals will be utterly shocked by the proximity of the other. They will then perform an elaborate little dance, like bowerbirds ducking and bobbing in search of a mate, before moving out of the way. You should always stand well back and let the lift riders out first. When you enter a ground floor lift on your own, there will be an agonizingly long wait for the doors to close. Long enough that you will assume the lift is broken. Do not do anything. The second you try to step out, the doors will start to close, and you will curse and step back inside. When they finally start to shut again, someone unseen will put an arm into the gap, causing the doors to open once more. A body will eventually follow. This may well be repeated several times. If you're too prone to stress to wait patiently, take the stairs. At some point, you must take the lift back down to the ground level. When the doors open on your floor, someone will come out of it looking at their phone. They will eventually look up and realize that this is not where they were meant to get out. They will emit a small, high-pitched noise and scurry back into the lift. When this happens, you must laugh in a friendly way. They've just endured the experience of entering another company's territory without permission. It's a bit like being parachuted behind enemy lines in error. Deciding whether to start a conversation in a lift depends on three factors: familiarity, fullness, and flaw. If you're in a lift with someone you don't know, say nothing, smile thinly, and then look fixedly at the ceiling. You cannot network or form friendships in a lift. You can only make strangers fear for their safety. If you get in with someone you work with and know well, chat away, but take account of who might overhear. Do not say, "Isn't Keith amazingly short?" when Keith's friends might be in there with you, or, buried deep among the crowd, Keith. If you get in a lift with someone you know vaguely, you're in very tricky territory. A nod may suffice, or you may have to speak to them. If this is the case, calibrate conversation to the length of the journey. If you have just 2 floors of ascent or descent together, do not ask their views on the Geneva Convention. Offices are tribal places, and so are lifts. Entering a crowded lift on the way down is the equivalent of going into a saloon in a Western. No one is pleased to see you. The air crackles with hostility. Do not take it personally. Just get in and take up as little space as possible. By the time someone on the next floor tries to enter, you'll be part of the in-group and can glare at them. There are other rules. That mirror, for example, is not actually for getting dressed. But these will do for starters. Next time, I'll bring you helpful tips on how to sign in at reception.
Subscribing to Economist Podcast Plus helps make our journalism possible. Thank you. Search Economist Podcast Plus for a free trial. And that's it for this episode of The Intelligence. Let us know what you think of the show. You can get in touch at podcast@economist.com. We'll see you back here tomorrow.